The State Board of Education business meeting will get underway, and we will start with our roll call. So Denise, please call a roll.
Patricia Tim?
Yes.
Rachel Wise?
Yes.
Maureen Nichols?
Yes.
Patrick McPherson?
Here.
Molly O'Halloran?
Present.
John Witzel?
Yes.
Glenn Flint?
Yes.
And Lily Larson?
Present.
And Commissioner Bloomstead?
Present.
All present.
Thank you. Would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Information regarding the Open Meetings Act is posted on the east wall of this room on the south side of the door. Live web streaming will be available through the State Board of Education website, www.education.ne.gov/stateboard. Board members, please remember to engage your microphones before speaking and turn them off when you're finished. And please turn off personal cell phones. Thank you. We'll now move to the approval of minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the November 3rd through 4th, 2016 meetings?
So move.
Second.
Motion and second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Denise, please call the roll.
John Witzel?
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran?
Yes.
Lily Larson?
Yes.
Glenn Flint?
Yes.
Patrick McPherson?
Yes.
Maureen Nichols?
Yes.
Rachel Wise?
Yes.
Patricia Tim?
Yes.
8 yes.
Thank you. Next, we'll move to the approval of agenda. Commissioner, are there any recommended changes for today's agenda?
No changes for today.
Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I move we approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Denise, please call the roll.
Lily Larson?
Yes.
Glenn Flint?
Yes.
John Witzel?
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran?
Yes.
Patrick McPherson?
Yes.
Maureen Nichols?
Yes.
Rachel Wise?
Yes.
Patricia Tim?
Yes.
8 yes.
Thank you. We will now move into our public comment period, and we appreciate the members of the public who are here today. We've had several sign-ins, so we will get started. We do not have any special requests today, so we'll start with our first individual who signed in, and that is Lynn Tuttle. Good morning.
Do you have a preferred
Right
seat?
right up in front, and you will have 5 minutes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today at your state board meeting. My name is Lynn Tuttle, and it is my pleasure to serve as the Director of Content and Policy for the National Association for Music Education, the national service organization providing support to our nation's music educators, including the 903 members here in the beautiful state of Nebraska. By the way, Nebraska is well represented as leaders of our nation's music educators, with 2 Nebraskans currently representing the North Central states on our national board, and our immediate past president being none other than Dr. Glenn Neerman from the University of Nebraska. This morning, I was asked to share some of the ways that you, the Nebraska State Board of Education, can support music education as you undertake the important work of developing and approving Nebraska's plan for ESSA, the new federal education law. This new bipartisan law places decision-making squarely back in your hands, allowing you to create a version of ESSA that best meets the needs of Nebraska students, parents, schools, and educators. So, how do the choices available to you under ESSA relate to music education? I want to share 4 questions to help you imagine what can be included in Nebraska's ESSA plan to support music education for Nebraska students. Question 1. As you work through the ESSA plan, how will you articulate support for a well-rounded education, including music? For the first time, music is listed as a standalone subject in federal law as part of what Congress has defined as a well-rounded education. The listing of well-rounded education carries throughout the entirety of the bill, creating opportunities for music to be supported by these federal education funds. The state could provide examples of how the law can support the well-rounded education subjects through all of the federal funding streams, including requesting that schools address the well-rounded subjects in their Title I school-wide plans, and that districts involve subject specialists like music educators in their needs assessments work for Title IV block funding. Question 2. How can the state of Nebraska support the delivery of a high-quality, well-rounded education, including music, for all of Nebraska's students and communities. This could potentially include updating Rule 10 to match the language in ESSA, treating all well-rounded education subjects, including music, the arts, and physical education, as being on equal par and as required as the quote-unquote tested subjects. Question 3. How will you measure the success of providing a well-rounded education, including music, to Nebraska students? One of the most exciting changes and challenges, I think, in the federal law is the power given to you as a state board to articulate your state's accountability system, including at least one additional measure beyond test scores and graduation rates. Several states are contemplating adding access and participation rates to all well-rounded subject areas, including music and the arts, either to their accountability systems or to their state report card systems for schools. States ranging from Arizona to Connecticut, Kentucky to New Jersey are considering this option right now. An additional accountability metric to consider is a measure of soft skills or non-cognitive skills. I really like it when it's called non-cognitive skills because they're all actually highly cognitive in nature. A group of independent school districts in California is doing just that with their ESSA waiver, measuring areas such as collaboration, self-efficacy, and perseverance. As a music teacher and a performing musician, I know that music helps grow and hone these skills. Including such non-traditional measures in your accountability system could create a very different sense of what is valued in Nebraska schools, beyond just reading and math test scores. And question 4. How can a well-rounded education, including music, support Nebraska students in schools that are falling behind academically? Again, opportunities are available within ESSA to think of all subject areas as supporting schools in need of improvement and students who are academically at risk. Schools identified as low performing are required to look at equitable distribution of resources for their students. Including well-rounded education and that evaluation of instructional resources will help keep music and arts available to students in these schools. I know from data in Arizona under No Child Left Behind that failing schools often provide the fewest opportunities in music and the arts. ESSA allows you to reconsider and to counter this drill and kill mentality of NCLB and encourage a full and rich education, even as students receive that additional needed instructional support. Finally, recall that you have wonderful content specialists at your Nebraska Department of Education. I encourage you to include them in this process to help you make certain that all aspects of a complete and well-rounded education are available for Nebraska students through your ESSA plan. Thank you for the opportunity to share these thoughts. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Next, we have Carol Rayer. Good morning, Mrs. Rayer. You will have 5
Good morning.
minutes.
On a normal day, I would take up the whole 5 minutes. But today, I just would like to thank Glenn Flint for the work that he has done in the past couple of years on the board, and hope that you stay involved with the education of the state of Nebraska. You're a great asset to the program, and we appreciate your votes. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Jay Sears. Good morning.
Morning.
You will have 5 minutes.
If you're lucky, I won't do that, right? Good morning. For the record, I'm Jay Sears, and I represent the Nebraska State Education Association. Just thought I would point out, besides my friends from the music world, which without my music and my trumpet, I wouldn't be here. Wouldn't have ever gotten out of North High School or graduated from UNL. So, but it's a momentous occasion, I think, today. As I walked in, I noticed a friend that I got to meet probably, how long ago was it, Max? 15 years or 20 years ago? About 25 years ago, okay. See, Max remembers much longer than I. We have amongst us a former State Board of Education member and his spouse, who is having her very last State Board of Education meeting, and so I thought it was appropriate that both of them are here and thank their family for their service to the educators and the children of the state of Nebraska. And so we'll miss you, but I know your phone number. I know Max. And I'm sure we'll be in touch, and Lily, you will do other great things, I'm sure, for Lincoln and the state of Nebraska. And so on behalf of the educators of Nebraska, I thank you for your service. And not to be left out, I told Glint yesterday, I thanked him for his service and his viewpoints on the board, and keep working for us, keep working for our children. Thank you for your service, and don't leave public service, so thank you. And could you be done before noon so I win the pool?
Thank you, Jay. All right, next we are going to move, I don't think we have any other public comment at this time, so we are going to move to some recognition that we have. And I'm going to turn it over first to my colleague, Lily Larson.
And do I need this on for this as well? Okay, so would Dr. Swisher please come up in front? Just kind of right there so everybody can see you. This is a very special friend of the board's and to Education Nebraska. So it is my pleasure to read a resolution about your service and what it has meant to the state. The Department of Education, Nebraska State Board of Education's resolution is in recognition of the retirement of Scott Swisher. Whereas Dr. Scott Swisher has served Nebraska Department of Education as Deputy Commissioner of Education for the past 7.5 years. Whereas Dr. Swisher has served as a Nebraska teacher, principal, and superintendent for 29 years. Now we know what you've been doing all this time. Whereas Dr. Swisher has represented the state of Nebraska admirably, professionally, and with distinction as Compact Commissioner for the state of Nebraska in the Interstate Compact on Educational Opportunity for Military Children, Nebraska Department of Education's Record Department, the representative for Nebraska Department of Education on the Nebraska Pandemic Preparedness Coordinating Committee. Wow. And the representative for Nebraska Department of Education on the Nebraska Coalition for Juvenile Justice. Extremely important. Whereas Dr. Swisher's leadership and service will continue to benefit Nebraska children and students and their schools, excuse me, after he retires on December 31st, 2016 as Deputy Commissioner of Education. Therefore, be it resolved that the Nebraska State Board of Education recognizes Dr. Scott Swisher's contributions and service to the NDE, and that the Nebraska State Board of Education greatly appreciates his leadership and dedication to Nebraska students and schools and to the NDE. On behalf of the State Board of Education, congratulations on behalf of President Wise, Vice President Larson, and all the board members on December the 2nd, 2016.
It's been an honor to be able to serve the children and the parents and the people of Nebraska. It's been a wonderful career. I just can't believe how quickly it's gone. I thank you all, and God bless.
Actually, I'll probably see you at an airport, because we'll both be traveling. Oh, dear. Okay, I continue to have another opportunity here to represent the board. And I would appreciate it if Gary Sherman could please come forward.
I did.
Here comes another dear friend. And as Jay said, you go back to 25 years with Max too. So, wow. The Nebraska State Board of Education resolution. It's in resolution of your retirement, Gary. Whereas Gary Sherman has contributed to the quality of special education services provided by the Nebraska public and non-public schools, as well as to the assurance of an appropriate, key word, appropriate education enjoyed by all Nebraska children with disabilities. And it's during his 45 years of outstanding service that this has been accomplished. Whereas Gary Sherman has provided guidance and leadership to the NDE, Nebraska schools, to special education at Advisory Council, the SEAC, as the senior administrator of the Office of Special Education. Whereas Gary Sherman was dedicated to the education of children with disabilities, working diligently to assist schools throughout Nebraska meet the students' unique needs through his leadership. Actually, I think you started this department, didn't you? Whereas Gary Sherman has represented Nebraska well, specifically the Nebraska Department of Education, working with the Federal Office of Special Ed, the OSCP, and the National Association of State Directors of Special Ed, which is NASDSC. As you know, educators love acronyms. Whereas Gary Sherman, during his career, was recognized as the recipient of the Distinguished Educator Service Award for Vision and Leadership on behalf of all children by the Nebraska Association of Special Education Supervisors. By being the beneficiary of the Glenn L. Latham Award for dedicating his professional life to ensure that all children with disabilities throughout Nebraska are provided with quality education. And by being the recipient of the Heritage Award for his contribution and services to the National Association of State Directors of Special Ed for his influence in the field of special ed. Whereas Gary Sherman will retire December the 30th, 2016, leaving a legacy of support for Nebraska children ages birth to 21, very important, to their parents, to the teachers in schools. Therefore, be it resolved that the Nebraska State Board of Education recognizes Gary Sherman's contributions and service to Nebraska public and non-public schools. That's important too, extremely important, on behalf of generations of Nebraska children with disabilities. And that the Nebraska State Board of Education members greatly appreciate the assistance Gary Sherman has provided to board members over the years and his tireless dedication to Nebraska children, particularly those with disabilities. On behalf of the Board of Education, for President Rachel Wise and Vice President Lily Larson and the full board, we give you our congratulations and deep-hearted thanks.
Well, I know that you would prefer not to be here till noon, so I'll try to keep this short, but just want to say basically thank you to this board and this commissioner, as well as all of the boards and commissioners that have been here previously, for the support they've given to me personally, but more importantly to children with disabilities. The goal has always been to make sure that children with disabilities have the opportunity to know about and live the good life. And I think that in Nebraska, we've maybe accomplished that at this point. And I think that if a family is in Nebraska, they can feel good about the education that their child with a disability might have access to. So that's good. When I started, I never dreamed I'd be here 40 plus years, but and obviously one would not be here that long without having incredible, dedicated staff, and fortunately that's been the case for me all of these years. So it's a pleasure to be able to again say thank you. The Department of Ed has been extremely good to me, and it's been a privilege for me to play a small role in what we've been able to accomplish for children with disabilities. So thank you again.
Thank you, Vice President Larson. Thank you again, Scott and Gary. Again, a tremendous loss in many respects, but we know that you'll continue to be friends and support the Department of Education. Certainly your leadership and the imprint you've left is very heartfelt to all the people here. Next, we have some additional recognition to continue with. And it continues to be hard. And we start by putting Glenn Flint on the spot. So Glenn, could you come forward? You're next. You're next. We're doing this just a little differently than the last two that we've done, and the commissioner and I are going to tag team before we get to the resolution a little bit. And we don't know, other colleagues may feel compelled to join in. Glenn has brought so much to this Board of Education in the 3 years he has been on the board. His dedication, his leadership, his sense of humor, his questioning again, has really, I think, helped to shape this board and move this board forward in ways that we can't even begin to express. Glenn immediately started to demonstrate leadership. He very engaged in all of his committee work that he's been involved with, but also through his leadership. He's been involved as a leader in competency-based education, and really probably one of our longer lasting study committees. Thorough, including a trip in December to Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and as we explored and learned a lot, and I know moving forward, Glenn will make sure we continue to think about personalizing learning and competency-based education for every student that's here. He also brought his expertise into data and continuous improvement, and for that conversation, I'm turning it over to the commissioner to pick up.
Yes, and one of the things that Glenn taught me, I mentioned it last night, was you know, what's the difference between an introverted psychometrician and an extroverted psychometrician? And he told me that the extroverted psychometrician would look at your shoes, and I appreciated that one. Glenn brings a lot of insights to us as someone with a deep understanding of computers and data and the ability to think about systems. And our work on AQuest wouldn't have happened without Glenn. I will tell you, evidence-based analysis is a legacy of Glenn's on the board as well, that we really started to dive in and think about how we're going to do accountability differently. We couldn't have done it without you, Glenn, and I really do deeply appreciate your your work and your efforts and your commitment to the high-paying job that the State Board of Education is, and your extra time and effort. And I know our staff really appreciate you as well. So thank you, Glenn.
Thank you.
And before I read the resolution, since the commissioner's last point was the extra time, we are making some changes in our process. In the past, we've always given outgoing board members a plaque, but we felt that, and thanks to the work of the staff, that really something that represented the time that's been given is maybe a better recognition for us at this point in time. The other recognition that we'll be starting this year, we'll be putting a plaque that honors all board members, so that there will be recognition in this room for the work that our outgoing board members do. So with that, I'll get to the resolution. So this resolution from the Nebraska State Board of Education is in recognition of State Board member Glenn Flint. Whereas Glenn Flint has contributed significantly to the quality of education provided by Nebraska schools, as well as the excellence of education enjoyed by all Nebraska students during his years of service on the State Board of Education. Whereas Glenn Flint has represented District 2 residents with integrity, dedication, and caring. Whereas Glenn Flint has provided guidance and leadership to the State Board of Education, serving as member, leading and serving on committees representing the State Board at numerous conferences, forums, and workshops. Whereas Glenn Flint served in his committee leadership roles to lead conversations in innovation and data and continuous improvement, assessment, standards, and competency-based education. He led and advocated for conversations that addressed dyslexia and a focus on innovations in serving students with special needs in reading. Whereas Glenn Flint leaves a legacy of strong leadership and support of Nebraska students, schools, and the Nebraska Department of Education. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Nebraska State Board of Education recognizes Glenn Flint and his contributions and service to Nebraska students, and that the Nebraska State Board of Education members express their collective appreciation and admiration for his leadership and for his dedication to service on the State Board of Education. On behalf of the State Board of Education, this day, December 2nd, 2016.
Thank you all. It's been a wonderful experience to be able to serve on the Nebraska State Board of Education. I'm going to miss all of you, but I'll stay in touch. I wanted to recognize my sister from Lincoln and my mom, who came all the way from Alliance for Thanksgiving. I wish you all the best, and we'll keep in touch. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We're not finished yet. Not at all. Before we get to the formal resolution, again, you know, we want to thank, this one's hard to thank Lily for all that she's done. And with Lily, as was mentioned earlier, you get two for the price of one, which has also been a benefit. And so we benefit from Max, but more importantly, we have benefited from Lily. And Lily's contributions, her contribution started, and I think today was such an appropriate day to recognize our fine arts and have comments about our fine arts, because Lily from the get-go has been about fine arts and not let us forget about the fine arts, which we will not forget about the fine arts. I will always hear, as long as I'm on the board, Lily in my ear with fine arts, and thinking about making sure we don't forget all students, and students who are high ability learners that need special attention and opportunities as well. Lily has been determined at times to get some things accomplished, and that has shown in our work. And again, we are so grateful for that leadership that she has provided in standards, in committees, in assessment, in legislation, in policy. As vice president for the past 2 years, it's been such an honor and privilege to serve with you in this leadership role. So Lily has just brought to so much to us for the board, and in particular, she has brought her leadership around the strategic planning. And with that, I'll turn it over to the commissioner for his remarks.
Yes, and actually, thank you, Lily, for your insights and direction on, and insistence, really, that we get strategic planning out of the way at this meeting. I appreciate that, all you can imagine. But Lily's very strategic all the time, is what I would say. My mom and dad showed up here one time, and somehow I turn and look, and I see Lily and my mom arm in arm talking, and I realized quickly, and Lily, I always appreciate, she says she made the motion to hire me, which I also deeply respect and appreciate. But she tells my mom that, being so proud that, that they have me, and she turns to my mom, and my mom says something like, well, if he doesn't work out, I've got 6 more boys that you can try out. So Lily's strategic in trying to recruit other future commissioners, perhaps, or other things. But truly, it's been a great honor to be able to work with you. And I know, by the way, the staff, again, feels very much the same way. And your dedication to education is unparalleled. So thank you.
Thank you. Goodness.
And we need you up front
Well,
of the center, Lily, so I
like
can
you.
read the resolution.
You know, I am a hugger,
I know. I'm gonna make you stand up here all by yourself, just
Okay,
like
I
you
will
did.
go up there.
You started that.
We didn't make you do that, though.
Education. Do you want me to wait before you read that? Then I'll give you my oration.
We can do both. Well, I'll read and then, how
Okay.
about that? So, how about I read? This is what we will miss. So much. So this resolution from the Nebraska State Board of Education is recognition of State Board member Lily Larson. Whereas Lily Larson has contributed significantly to the quality of education provided by Nebraska schools, as well as the excellence of education enjoyed by all Nebraska students during her years of service on the State Board of Education. Whereas Lily Larson has represented District 1 residents with integrity, dedication, and caring. Whereas Lily Larson has provided guidance and leadership to the State Board of Education, serving as Vice President, leading and serving on committees, representing the State Board of Education at numerous conferences, forums, and workshops. Whereas Lily Larson led the committee to develop standards and notably led the board effort to institute fine art standards, always led the efforts to focus on students first in all areas, including decisions made by the board regarding standards assessment and services and supports for all schools. Whereas Lily Larson leaves a legacy of strong leadership in support of Nebraska students, schools, and the Nebraska Department of Education. Now therefore be it resolved that the Nebraska State Board of Education recognizes Lily Larson in her contributions and service to Nebraska students, and that the Nebraska State Board of Education members express their collective appreciation and admiration for her leadership and for her dedication to service on the State Board of Education. On behalf of the State Board of Education, this second day of December 2016.
You're too kind. Education, it's the equalizer. It's what makes it possible for kids to all succeed. And this board, this department, through the work like this strategic plan that's going to be passed today, it is what makes it possible to acknowledge the interests, the talents, the aspirations of all children. What's the key word there? All. as we talked earlier, the children with disability, the children with high talents, the children who want to pursue some area that we don't even know about today. Those are the kids that are going to be accommodated, the early childhood. I mean, I look at this group and each person here has their specialty that they support. Thank you for being here, for all that you've done for me. I thank the people of Lincoln, Waverly, Firth, Norris, because I'm here for the surrounding communities, as well as clear across the state. Thank you, Lincoln. And for the Lincoln School Board, having done that 12 years. Steve Joel, fabulous job. I worked with 3 different superintendents there. And I've worked with 5 different commissioners in education. Mainly because of my husband, Max. And better yet, our 3 sons. We now have to take a break so that so we'll take about a 10 to 15 minute break. Advice from legal counsel regarding a contested case and for the protection of the public interest.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. Denise, please call the roll.
Patricia Tim,
Yes.
Rachel Wise.
Yes.
Maureen Nichols,
Yes.
Patrick McPherson.
Yes.
Glenn Flynn,
Yes.
Lily Larson.
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran.
Yes.
John Whitson.
Yes.
8 yes.
The State Board will now go into executive session to get legal advice regarding a contested case. Thank you.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to come out of the executive session, which was to receive advice from legal counsel regarding a contested case and for the protection of the public interest. Is there any questions or comments? If not, Denise, please call the roll.
Lily Larson,
Yes.
Glenn Flint,
Yes.
John Wetzel,
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran.
Yes.
Patrick McPherson,
Yes?
Maureen Nichols.
Yes.
Rachel Wise.
Yes.
Patricia Tim.
Yes.
8 yes.
Thank you. The State Board will now continue with action item 7.1, and that's to consider the hearing officer's recommendation decision in NDE case number 16-09, Morgan Flash versus Commissioner. Is there a motion?
Yes. I move in regard to grievance of Michelle Morgan Flash, NDE case number 16-09, that this board adopt the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and the recommended decision of the hearing officer as amended, affirming the decision of the commissioner with respect to the discipline imposed on the grievant, and to adopt the final order proposed by legal counsel.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments? Hearing none. Denise, please call the roll.
Glenn Flint,
Yes.
Lily Larson.
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran,
Yes.
John Wetzel.
Yes.
Patricia Tim.
Yes.
Rachel Wise.
Yes.
Maureen Nichols.
Yes.
Patrick McPherson.
Yes.
8 yes.
Thank you, Leslie. We will now continue on with our meeting, and I believe our guests are here for special presentation. Glenn?
Yes, they are.
Okay. I think we will move on to item 9, and then we will come back to our agenda after our special presentations. We have 2 special presentations this morning. The first one is we'll just go ahead in the order they're in. So the first one is on the detection and treatment of dyslexia, and it's a 10-minute presentation by Rebecca Miller. Glenn, did you want to set this up? This is...
Sure. I met Rebecca at the Nebraska Dyslexia Association fall celebration, and she had some interesting ideas about early detection, where there's some legislation that we'll have a chance to look at hopefully later next year, and then also current practice and research, how we can improve what we're doing now. So I thought this would be of interest to the board.
Everybody got one?
We do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, there's one for the record, I believe. As well.
Okay.
Whoops.
Good morning.
Morning.
I would just first like to start by thanking President Weiss, Commissioner Bloomstead, and Mr. Flint for allowing me to come today to have a conversation with the State Board of Ed. My name is Rebecca Miller. I am the owner and managing director of Fixlexia, which is a clinic in Omaha that we specifically work with individuals with dyslexia and other reading-related disabilities. What I would like to do is I provided, we're going to talk about a roadmap, and the roadmap will be the table of contents. So if you want to open up your binder, first on the left-hand side, you're going to see just a warning signs checklist that's categorized in groups. I find that many people find this helpful. It will help them to kind of see things and be able to put them together when we're actually looking for what are the markers for children with dyslexia. It's also important to know that Dyslexia, we provide clinical evaluation and intervention all in our clinic in Omaha. So not only do we do the evaluations, we actually are very hands-on in the actual interventions that we implement for kids. The next piece is the dyslexia basics. I'm not really going to go through that. I understand there have been another board member from NDA that's been here. This will just be some of your basic information about what it is, that it's neurobiological. It is a lifelong language-based disability, primarily with a deficit in what we refer to as phonological processing. And I'm going to explain that a little bit down further in the presentation. The next piece, I'd like to pull on tab 2. I would just like to make sure that people are aware in Rule 51, which obviously is the regs for special education, in the category of a specific learning disability, the definition includes individuals with dyslexia. And so I think there are lots of conversations that I have across the state, and I think this is a really important point to clarify that this already is in our current regs. The next piece I'd like to look at would be when we're looking at prevalence rates. What are we looking at here in our state? So the next document is the Nebraska child count numbers. So this would be under tab number 3. If you go down a bit, there's a category called specific learning disabilities. For this particular child count number, you're looking at ages 6 to 21. And so if you go down to specific learning disabilities, you'll see in school year 2015-2016, in that category in Nebraska, we're looking at 15,118 children. Why is that number important? That number is important because the National Institutes of Health say that 80% of children that are verified with a specific learning disability likely have dyslexia. Dyslexia is the most common learning disability, and it is also the most researched learning disability out there. So there's lots of science about what is going on from functional MRIs. We know literally places in the brain where students are having difficulty. It is in the word analysis and the word retrieval places in our brain. If we go on to the next point 4, this is clearly probably the most important thing in this packet, okay? Because what we now know is when we intervene early, it makes significant difference for kids. And so typically what we see, even kids that are come to our clinic or in schools that I interact with special education, from a special education perspective, many kids, until the demands get great enough, you don't typically see them. You don't see them because the demands are greater, but the reality is you can intervene very, very early. You can intervene as young as kindergarten with basic screenings that look at some of the constructs that we know are risk factors for dyslexia. So while schools, obviously across the state, are doing screenings and early on in kindergarten, sometimes what happens is that those screenings do not necessarily include markers specific to dyslexia. And when you look at what is the reliability of looking at the markers for dyslexia, you can, the marker is about 86% that you can, if you screen them in the fall of their kindergarten year, it will be able to look at the end of their first grade year, which is 2 school years, who literally would be above or below their reading level, okay? So that is, early intervention is best because in those early years, we are learning, our kiddos are learning how to read. But 3rd grade and later, they are reading to learn. And that is the big piece for that. The next is, and I'm not going to go through this either, but this is a really great white paper with regard to best practice in the area of selecting screening instruments. And so I will leave that. Obviously, you can have that. One of the things I would like to talk briefly about is some of the kids that we're seeing in the clinic, which are also the same kids that we're seeing in school. And these kids, otherwise very, very bright, really struggling to read. About a year and a half ago, we had a young boy that came into our clinic that was just finishing up first grade. He was reading 7 words a minute. 7 words a minute. Very bright, very articulate, very hardworking kid. In 1 year's time, school year time, he went from 7 words a minute with the proper instruction to 70 words a minute. And that is incredible growth. So when we're thinking about the kids that are affected by it, we're thinking about little blonde towhead boys like Bo and other kids, McKenna, the kids that have come to our clinic, but they are everywhere in our state. The next piece is just briefly to talk about what are the building blocks for proficient readers. What is the trajectory that they must travel in order to get to what we all want, which is good, solid comprehension. So when we look at this first, the chart goes from top to bottom, left to right. So with kids that have, or adults for that matter, that have deficits in this second category, this phonological and phonemic awareness category, this is typically where our kids with dyslexia get stuck. They get stuck here. And probably the most important piece of this visual is the fact that if you do not master these skills in this phonological category, you do not get the rest. You have to get this. And so I think it's also important to talk about what is phonological processing. Specifically, it is essentially the underlying sound system that we all need for reading and spelling. And so when we look at that, it is the ability to discriminate the smallest units of sound, okay, which is a phoneme. Let me give you an example. If you have the word cat, okay, cat is 1 syllable, but it has 3 separate sounds, ka, a, and t, right? So kids with dyslexia, it is not that they cannot hear those sounds, but sometimes they cannot discriminate those sounds. And when you cannot discriminate them, you have a lot of difficulty with reading and spelling. And a piece that I would like to clear up is I hear many times that kids with dyslexia have to have phonics instruction. That is absolutely true. Systematic, multisensory language instruction is what they need. But the piece that is typically left out of that conversation is kids do not benefit from phonics instruction unless they have good phonemic awareness, which is that ability to discriminate those sounds, okay? 100% auditory, no supportive print, okay? They have to have that sound system. They have to have that sound system in place. So that's a really, really, really important piece. When we're looking at overall screenings, we want to make sure we're looking at overall phonological processing. We want to make sure we're looking at a piece called rapid naming, which is a strong indicator for reading fluency as kids progress on. The other, probably the 2 last points I'd like to make before opening it up for questions would be, I think there are some very small, fine tweaks that we could possibly make in the area of evaluation and screening that would be very, very beneficial. That I don't think you need a big system overhaul and all those kinds of things. But one of the pieces I would really encourage you to consider is the piece of spelling. Because what the research says is while you can have good readers, and we see this in our clinic, you can have good readers. Sometimes the spelling does not come up at the same time, okay? Spelling is a much more complex skill. So while you can have a good reader and a poor speller, it is highly, highly, highly unlikely that you would have a really good speller, okay, and a poor reader. So when you work on the spelling, and spelling is a lot less irregular than many people think, there is a very much a systematic way to teach it. It is a different way for us to, I think, get our heads around effective intervention, not only for kids with dyslexia, but all children. And that is probably maybe the last point I'll make, is that kids with dyslexia, the type of instruction that they need is actually good for all kids, okay? Good phonics-based instruction is good for all kids. The last piece is just a visual of a young lady that came to our clinic at the end of her fifth grade year. And simply what it is a pre and post of her writing, which I think is symptomatic of when kids have really good instruction, the type of outcomes that we can see. So not only is early intervention, really, really important, kids that are older still absolutely can benefit from methods and instruction that we know work for kids with dyslexia. So that probably concludes my comments, so I would open it up for any questions.
Thank you, Mrs. Miller. I appreciate your presentation and comments. Do we have any questions?
You know, we're about to adopt a very ambitious strategic plan that
Yes.
aims to improve reading proficiency quite a bit in the state. And if you talk a little bit about the legislation, and even if we don't get that legislation, things we as a state board could do that would help us reach that goal, because my thinking is that a lot of the problems we have with reading proficiency are related to dyslexia and the fact that we're not catching it early enough.
I would say probably the early intervention is key. I think making individuals, well, dyslexia has been around for a very long time, and first researched as early as the 1920s. There is a lot of misinformation on the ground. So I think part of it is, for lack of a better phrase, kind of a public awareness campaign to make sure people are even, in the general public, but obviously also in the schools, that people are even aware of the markers to look for, okay? The other piece, if you're looking at overall literacy, I think another piece is to really look at what the research says, the science-based research with regard to reading. And actually, I just realized I skipped one little piece here that would probably point that out, is looking at, it'd be under tab number 6. When we're looking at science-based reading research and the types of components that you need for literacy, early literacy, kind of bullet points in each of those categories, what science-based reading research looks at, and then between that and whole language, or a balanced literacy approach. And to that point, I guess I would just simply say that kids with dyslexia do not do well with a whole language approach. That the research clearly points out that a more systematic approach to reading intervention is best. The other piece, if I had a magic wand, would be probably to look at, when we're looking at writing assessments, state writing assessments, that spelling is included in that rubric, simply because of what I mentioned before. Spelling really does assist in making good readers, and I think many people will say, well, you know, kids have access to spell check, and they do. And that's one point that's put in that article, that spell check is not always that reliable, and in addition to that, it doesn't typically root out things like homophones, you know, words that are saying like 8 and 8, I ate something, and the number 8. It doesn't typically root out those things. But that would probably be some of the bigger pieces. Thank you for your question.
There's I'm sorry.
No, that's right. Go ahead and
Somebody
thank
first?
Commissioner.
Oh, okay.
About the same time, so. Yeah, thank you, Commissioner.
I don't think we're gonna, just because Glenn is gonna be absent from the board in the future, that we're gonna let this issue go away. I think we've got some real concerns about that as a board. I'm just wondering, you know, from a number of other presenters and information we've had, it seems is there a greater prevalence with those that are faced with trauma, that are with economic conditions? Are you finding that?
That's a wonderful question. And again, back to the research, it spans all economic areas, all ethnicities, and it is really across the world. So probably one of the premier individuals that really has looked at that is Dr. Sally Shayowitz, that does a lot of research in dyslexia issues at the Yale Dyslexia Clinic. But no, you may have kids that have less exposure to literacy when they're young based on economic conditions, but when we go back to what the brain research says, some of that sound mapping and the ability to do that, it is hardwired. It is neurobiological. But the good thing is, with early intervention, you can head off many things down the road. But that's a great question.
Yeah, and thanks, Rebecca, for being here and
Thank
the
you.
opportunity to chat with you. I think last week or whatever it was. I lost track now,
Yeah.
but
Before Thanksgiving, right?
Yeah, was it before that? Yeah. Anyway, some point.
Time flies.
Yeah. You highlight a couple of the things we talked about relative to what are the kind of the tweaks in how we address, you know, processes or drawing attention to it appropriately, and and you know, highlighting Rule 51, for example, that it's in there, and things along those lines. What are the you know, kind of among those kind of minor tweaks? Is it more about awareness for us right now with educators? Is it more about for us, from a policy standpoint, I would love to say there shall not be dyslexia,
Right.
but that doesn't work
Me
from
too,
a policy
actually.
standpoint. So, you know, what are some of those other maybe kind of tweaks that we
Okay.
chatted about that might be helpful?
I think it would be, one piece definitely would be an overall, a simple awareness campaign about what it is, whether it's a 15, 20-minute video that staff could view, meaning at the school level. I think it is really going back and having people understand what are the building blocks to reading. Because when an individual, if you are teaching, if you're an individual and you're not quite sure the building blocks and how those things progress, when children begin to have problems, it's hard to be able to tease out what it is. So I can tell you, I mean, I've been into lots of schools. There's not a school in this state that could not tell me, you know, this child is struggling with fluency or accurate reading or comprehension. But if you peel back a little bit and you're asking questions why, those are answers that probably will make it difficult for school personnel to design intervention. So it would be that piece. Now, with the exception, my caveat to saying that is speech and language pathologists obviously are very well trained in this area and are strong advocates and individuals that really understand language. So when you have that reading disability, although it's language-based, you can also have a kid with a language impairment. So getting SLPs on board makes a big difference. When we are looking at overall comprehensive special education evaluation, what I would say is there are some individual areas, sometimes oral fluency, definitely phonological processing. Those areas are not necessarily being addressed. And when we look at younger kids, things like pieces of the Woodcock-Johnson that include a spelling component, it's actually not really spelling. It's actually letter recognition and some of those kinds of things. And so looking at what those tests actually measure and line that up with best practice with regard to teasing out the markers for dyslexia. And actually, just this month, the International Dyslexia Association put out a publication specifically for school psychologists. These are the tests, these are the areas, these are these. So some of it is, yes, it's overall, but then I'm a pretty tactical person. So I always like to give people information. Now that we know this, what can we do on the ground? What are you specifically looking for? That's some of the warning signs or those things. And probably some just basic assessment training.
Okay, so that, and I just follow up a little bit, because that notion of what we need to do around professional
Yeah.
development, and I will kind of highlight just the one more point of what we've talked about, the goal within, I forget which tenet exactly we're on underneath that goal around interventions, though, and thinking about, we had this conversation about where do we, from a board perspective, what type of goal do we have around this, and we got to the intervention part, because in order to do interventions well, you're going to have to do your assessment well and diagnosis well and these things, and I think that's really kind of an important leadership role that the in our strategic plan, I think it starts to kind of define, hey, look, ultimately we're about finding some solutions that help students. So
I would agree. Good evaluation leads to good intervention, leads to good outcomes. Absolutely.
Okay,
Thank you.
Lily, and then Molly, and then okay, and then we're going to move on because we have another presentation waiting with some young people. So,
If you were to recommend to someone where they could go for professional training in this particular area, the diagnosis, the care, the direction, everything, is there a school in Nebraska that really stands out where this is?
To my knowledge, while I do know that there are some teacher colleges that may discuss dyslexia as part of coursework, to my knowledge, in the Teachers College, that there is no specific type of endorsement area for dyslexia. Different states, many states have done, they have had maybe like a dyslexia specialist route. Probably the most sophisticated, long-standing models are out of Texas. So they specifically train people. They actually have dyslexia specialists in the schools. So the answer is, where do you get training?
Are you out of Texas?
No.
No?
No, I just look at, when I'm looking and trying to figure out, I'm always, there's no reason to reinvent the wheel. So I would say I have contacts and connections across the United States of other people that are doing these types of things. And to your point, you have to really, really want the training to find it and dig it out. And so that is a concern I would tell you that I have, because even when people have the desire, when they want to learn, and I find many, many, many of the people that I interact with on the school levels, teachers in particular, they want the information.
Thank you for being candid about that. I mean, we need to know that.
Yeah. Here's, I guess, to that point, just briefly. While we are one of 11 remaining states that does not have dyslexia legislation on the books, there is a benefit to that. The benefit is that there are many states that have gone before us, and there are so many best practices already out there. And that's the piece that is really wonderful, and that is a really great opportunity for our state. There's lots and lots and lots of good models.
I was going to just say that if we're thinking about systemically dealing with this disability of dyslexia, it seems to me that we really need to partner with our 16 teacher education institutions, because if it really makes most significant impact between kindergarten and first grade, those early childhood years, those teachers that are being sent out to our schools, that's the biggest bang for our buck, to invest in the teachers with this training. And I was looking at the two different examples of writing, and it's not only the lack of spelling, but actually the function of the handwriting of this student has really improved as well. So
I had a developmental pediatrician, I was showing her that, and she mentioned to me, she said, that's how you're seeing that this is really neurological, that is really actually, when you are working with the type of instruction that kids need for dyslexia, what you are actually really doing is in the brain, there is a neural network for reading and spelling. So for kids with dyslexia, those neural networks are not, they're either non-existent or not very strong. So when you begin to build those neural networks back up, that is actually some of the results that you
and
see.
it was some of the symptoms you said about
Yeah.
this motor skills, et cetera.
Yeah.
Back to my comment about a systemic approach to this,
Mhm.
I would also recommend that you talk to Sharon Cott and the Nebraska Council of Teacher Education, because she does an awesome job thinking about how this works with the system as well.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I just have a couple questions. First of all, you mentioned possible legislation. I'm just wondering, you know, if what might be coming before the legislature, if there's something you're aware of what that is, if you can briefly describe that. And secondly, you know, as I'm looking at your number 4, I guess it is, you know, we test children in reading at age 3, or I mean at 3rd grade. Are we waiting too long to test those children? Should we be testing them at 2nd grade?
Initial screenings, best practice, universal screenings should begin in the fall of the kindergarten year. And you would continually do those twice, 2 additional times through the year, and then target intervention there. But screenings can also be used for kids past 3rd grade. If individuals in the school level feel that there is a child that needs to be tested, then obviously through Child Find and the referral process to special education, then that child likely should be tested. But if we're trying to, not necessarily limit, but I think if we catch some of these kids early, I don't think we would have our numbers ticking up in special education, but I want to be really careful because there are absolutely kids that do need those services, and I would not want to give the impression that a couple years early on and then no kids will ever be seen in special education. I think the national number for SPED is about 13%. With regard to legislation, I am a part of that. They are in the process now of drafting the bill, and so to be really honest, I would prefer until that draft comes out to hold off on my comments for that.
Okay, if there's no other, then we're gonna,
I
okay,
just want
Maureen,
to
and then
quick
we'll move
echo
on.
about what Molly said about the early childhood and the kindergarten, but also along with what Patrick was saying with, you know, 3rd grade. I like that idea, Patrick, because we have so many students that are mobile. And often those that are moving, shifting from school to school for various reasons, fall through the cracks.
Yep.
And so they could get lost in the shuffle of that early childhood, 1st grade, 2nd grade.
I agree, and I think one of the ways, I think that's a very important point, and I think one of the ways that we look at that is if there were to be universal screenings throughout the state, when those kids move around, if they move from, you know, Holdridge, Nebraska to Norfolk, those schools will have the same universal screening protocol, so you are less likely to miss them. For some of those kids that are highly mobile, transient. Yep.
Glenn? No, I was gonna have Glenn close it up, so if the quick question, then we'll go to Glenn, and then we've gotta move to our other
Thank you,
presentation.
Rachel. Thank you very much, ma'am. I appreciate it.
You're
Quick
welcome.
question for you. In regards to the screening at the early age, is it basically right now very subjective by the teacher?
No, I don't
Okay.
believe so. When you're looking at, in particular, I would not necessarily be as familiar. I know some of the schools more in western Nebraska I would not be as familiar as I am in Omaha simply because I am there.
Yes.
But no, I would not say that that's true. There are schools that some of the bigger districts are doing a pretty nice job of using norm reference assessments when they're using their screening tools. So it's not necessarily for some of them that they would need to change a lot. It literally would probably be 1 or 2 tasks within there. When they're doing those universal screenings. And to that point, universal screenings, the type of screenings that I would propose, you're looking at approximately 12 to 17 minutes a kid. These are not huge comprehensive evaluations, so they will yield lots of good information. And they do not have to be given by a special education teacher, any of those kinds of things. So they are pretty quick and can give a lot of good information in a very short period of time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Glenn, any?
All right, well, thank you, Rachel, for coming and sharing this with us. And I think the adage that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure
It is.
so true here. And this would save the state and the children a lot of grief later on, when if the longer we delay helping them, the worse it becomes for them, self-esteem and
Thank you.
graduation.
My contact information is in there. Feel free if anybody has further questions. I know this is a complex topic. I would be more than happy to answer anything I could.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Ms.
you.
Miller. Thank you for being here today.
No
Sorry,
problem.
Rebecca.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next I'm gonna turn over to the committee, Teaching and Learning Domain, to have our discussion on civics education. You know, here at the State Board, sometimes we have a problem with time. Just, you know, once in a while, 10 minutes becomes 30 and 15 probably 45. So I just want everyone to be aware that we probably will run a little long today, and that's perfectly okay, because our next presentation as well is a very important discussion that we have around civics education, and we're excited to have guests and a presentation around what our schools are doing. So I'll turn over to Maureen.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. Yesterday, I talked to the board briefly about social studies education, including civics education, because it was a discussion topic for the Teaching and Learning Committee yesterday. And as board members, we received a letter from Secretary of State John Gale, and I don't know if all of you have seen or read it, of his support of civics education. And I just want to highlight a couple of pieces in his letter to us. And it says, for democracy to flourish, people must be engaged in the civic affairs of the nation. In order to be competent and engaged citizens, an adequate civic education is essential. And he also says, and he stresses it in bold on the second page, I can't stress enough the importance of students receiving a firm foundation in civics education. And he goes on to say there is probably no one answer that is adequate when it comes to ensuring that students leave school with the firm belief about the importance of being civic-minded, good citizens, and active voters. They are concepts that go hand in hand. And I couldn't agree more with him. But I also want to thank Senator Christ, who spoke to the committee last month, who really has brought this to the forefront to us, and also for the support of Governor Ricketts in this effort. And I do want the board to understand, and I think we all do, and especially the public here, that civics education is going to be a priority for us on this board in the coming months. Yesterday, Corey Epler shared with us, with the committee, about the current efforts in social studies and civics education, and we've asked him to share with us today that information. So, Corey?
Thanks, Denise. Thanks, Maureen. For the record, Corey Epler, Senior Administrator for Teaching and Learning. The handout that Denise is providing was provided to the board, the committee members yesterday. There's a couple updates on there, so this does reflect a change from the document that was received yesterday. I wanted just to touch on a couple of things and then highlight a specific activity that we're planning as it relates to the topic of conversation. I will mention Harris Payne, our social studies specialist, is currently in DC at a national meeting, so he's not here. I did get an email from him last night saying, imagine that, a topic of conversation among the state's directors for social studies is civics readiness and civics education, so he's excited to bring back what he's learning. I think one of the things that is important for the Teaching and Learning Committee and our team as we begin down this road is really defining what we mean civic readiness to be. And I think we talked a little bit about that yesterday. And so one of the first steps as we think about defining civic readiness or civic leadership or how we can help students become civically engaged is we are going to host a summit in February. And I wanted just to point out that it's a social studies summit. So within our social studies standards, there are 4 strands: civics, economics, geography, and history. What you'll notice is that the test that was a subject of the bill that was introduced last year includes questions related to geography, civics, economics, and history. So Harris has been very intentional about saying let's talk about it as social studies education rather as one very specific strand within the social studies standards. We're going to have a social studies summit February 14th and 15th here in Lincoln. That was the change. We had a change in venue overnight, the dates. So it's still going to be in here in Lincoln, but they're available the 14th and 15th. Facilitated by Dr. Larry Dugash. Say that right? Yep. Everybody knows him but me, the non-Nebraskan. So we're very excited that he'll be able to facilitate the conversation for us. And our objectives for this meeting is really setting the stage for social studies education, helping us clarify and define civic readiness as a component of a social studies education program in our schools, and then really getting at to what are the activities, what are the resources, and what are the short and long-term goals that we might need in order really to facilitate and to advance the work that we've identified. I think it's really important too as we think about this, and I mentioned this yesterday as we talked about science standards and thinking about how this topic does not just reside in one classroom. So I think the students from Elm Creek are a great example of how social studies and civics education isn't just rest within a social studies classroom. As we think about the value and impact of our student organizations, members of FCCLA, to be able to identify how we're all in this, and if we're committed to civic readiness and helping students become civic leaders, it can't be isolated within a social studies classroom. It has to be a systematic, whole school effort. So I wanted to provide that update, give you a few of the details. We don't have the list of participants. We are just in initial planning stages with this, but as we move forward, we'll be sure to keep you informed of the progress of the summit and the outcome as well.
Do any board members have questions for Corey?
Will we be invited to the summit?
Yes, sir. Okay. Absolutely. Put it on your calendar. Oh, perfect.
Thank you, Corey.
Thanks, Marie.
Being a former classroom teacher, I always love it when we have students come and speak to us. Although I taught elementary, we have some high school students with us today from Elm Creek to share with us and highlight the example of civic education and engagement in Nebraska schools. And so with us, come on up. I think I've got all the names correct here. I might mispronounce names. Audrey Worthing, there's Audrey. Sydney Hubbard. Anna Hoffman. Yep. And Dean Tickle. And also joining us is Don Sufi. Right. From the Nebraska American Legion, and I just want to say welcome. Thank you for being here and getting out of school.
Well, good morning, everyone. First off, we would like to thank you for allowing us to come here today to talk about civics education from the perspective of Nebraska public school students and the importance of putting civics on a test that matters. We are all sophomores at the Elm Creek Public School District, and we are thrilled to be here this morning to share our story. We will also be hearing from our former superintendent, Dean Tickle, and as well as Don Sucky from the Nebraska American Legion.
We thought it would be fun to begin with a little quiz. Question number 1. What is the supreme law of the land? We are sure that you are all confident the answer is the Constitution. But when we asked that question to dozens of Nebraska's juniors and seniors, only 4 out of 200 students could answer correctly.
Question 2. Who is our current U.S. Secretary of State? Go ahead and guess. John Kerry, that's correct. But when we asked juniors and seniors of Nebraska, we received answers like Bill Clinton and Curious George. All right. Question 3. Who is our current Nebraska governor? Okay, that one's too easy. It's kind of like a trick question, right? Well, when we asked Nebraska students, however, less than 15% knew it was Governor Ricketts.
You may be wondering where we're going with this. Last year, we surveyed more than 200 Nebraska juniors and seniors from 5 different schools with the same U.S. citizenship test that immigrants must pass to become citizens. Less than 20% were able to pass.
When we met with our local legislator, Senator John Keene, to update him on the work we were doing, he shared with us a very relevant quote from Eleanor Roosevelt that reads, "Our children should learn the general framework of their government, and then they should know where they come in contact with the government. It must not be a distant thing or someone else's business."
I think we can all agree that we have a big divide to bridge if we as a state are going to accomplish this goal. The civics education that our parents and grandparents received in school looks very different than what we learn in classrooms today. The emphasis on science, math, and English in our curriculum has led to a generation of students in college and the workplace that are largely uninterested and uneducated in civics. Many people think that this younger generation does not care about civics engagement or education, but we believe that is far from the truth.
We do care about our country. We don't want to be disconnected from the world. We want to be challenged. We want to make a difference. And we need your help. We are asking that students in Nebraska be tested on the very same questions that all new immigrants to this country must pass. It is the least we can do to put civics back on the front burner where it belongs.
The lack of emphasis on civics has a drastic impact on our country's political process as well, impacting everything from our voter turnout to trust in our institutions. It comes as no surprise when people do not understand our political system, including how to make change in that system. They are naturally frustrated, and this often leads them to disengage from the political process. This year's election paints a colorful picture on that very scenario.
A strong civics foundation relates directly to one's ability to be an informed citizen, vote, run for office, and volunteer for community service. Re-emphasizing these priorities in our school can go a long way towards addressing many of the challenges facing our country.
Along with the Joe Foss Institute and groups like the American Legion and the Military Officers Association, we are asking that the State Board of Education take action to address the civics crisis in our state. The good news? Nebraska is not alone in this endeavor. As states across the country are putting into place heightened civic standards and mandating passage of the test as a condition to graduate. Thanks to the Joe Foss Institute, the test and study materials are available online at no cost to the school districts. The test contains a base level of knowledge that all citizens should know. That includes some history, geography, and government. And every question is tied directly to a Nebraska social studies standard.
This test is a perfect tool for schools to use to demonstrate competency with the Nebraska social studies requirements and the state board's mission that we create civics-minded students in Nebraska. The Foundation of Civics will also serve as a springboard for additional study and critical thinking within our classrooms.
14 other states and the Elm Creek School District here in Nebraska have already passed variations on the Civics Education Initiative into law. Please don't allow another graduating class of Nebraska students to enter adulthood without ensuring that they have a better understanding of American civics. Nebraska is known for doing things a little different than the rest, so we hope that we can lead from the middle by seizing this opportunity to create policies that benefit students well into their adult lives.
After completing the U.S. Constitution, Benjamin Franklin was asked by a woman on the street, "What have you given us?" He replied,
"A republic.
If you can keep it."
"This crisis is real, and we need your help to make sure civics is given the priority it deserves, so that we can preserve our republic for generations to come."
Thank you very much again for listening to us.
We are open for questions.
Any questions from the board members? Rachel?
It's so nice to be able to be on this side of it. Thank you so much for coming today and for being so eloquent in your presentation. I think that for us, I think I can speak for all of us, well, these are the kinds of things sometimes we need to hear. We need to hear your perspective and to learn from some of the things that you've been doing. So we appreciate that you take the time out of your school day, even though you're missing school today. I think you're demonstrating your civic responsibility by being here and by guiding us and informing us on things that you believe are very important. So thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Patrick?
Excuse me. I want to thank you also. I know there tends to be a thought process against testing, I think, any more testing and adding testing. But what I'm curious about is apparently Elm Creek School District has mandated this as a graduation requirement. Can you tell me what the feelings of the other students are as far as having to pass this, and maybe what you sense from the other teachers, without getting into trouble?
I can honestly say that a lot of kids in my class personally aren't too excited to have to do another test, but other students like my little sister and some kids from the elementary have expressed a really positive interest in taking the U.S. citizenship test and passing it. So though our older students are not as welcome to another test, our younger students are a little more receptive.
Glenn?
Well, thank you for coming and sharing and caring about civics education. I was just wondering, we have this all in our social studies standards. It's covered, I think, in 5th grade. Some of it's covered in 12th grade. I'm just wondering what happened. Did we teach it too early and people forgot, or we don't keep refreshing the material so people remember it? Why do you think it's not sticking?
Anna, do you want to answer that one?
Well, I think that when we learn it when we're younger, we don't really keep it in our mind as we grow older, because there's more stuff we learn and other things that we kind of hold above civics. So I think that this test is good to retain your memory and kind of help you remember where you stand in the government and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Molly?
Thank you for coming. I just wanted to take a moment to talk to the two supportive adults that are with you as well. In your opinion, Superintendent Tickle, do you believe that we can embed citizenship just by taking the test as a summative review, or how do you see this being more than just a test of superficial knowledge?
Yeah, thank you. Actually, I'm the former superintendent at Elm Creek, and I know, and so I'm the vice president of business and operations at Methodist College, which I want to bring that up, but it's bittersweet because I worked with these three gals on this initiative, and before that I was in Lexington, and it was a big deal in Lexington, and citizenship and status was absolutely one of the things that was on a lot of our students' minds. And when we approached, we had teachers that were working on their citizenship test and at the middle school, and they had their kids reenacting the citizenship ceremony. If you've ever been to one, it's an amazing thing. But I walked into a 6th grade classroom and I had kids challenge me, and I'm a former social studies English teacher. So I got this, you know, and asking me questions. They were getting 100% on their citizenship test, and came to Elm Creek, and you know, we did the same thing with our 4th, 5th, and 6th graders, and even had a 3rd grader said, "Can I take this?" and got like a 96% on it. Now they haven't had a lot of them formal education in civics and our government systems, but man, did they go after it. And we gave them a little medal and their name on a plaque, and they were pretty proud of it. You know, we know, like in Elm Creek this year, the senior class that needs to pass the test, as our new policy would mandate, have all passed it. They've got it down already. You know, we do have exceptions put in there that if it weren't appropriate as part of their IEP, you know, that it could be excused. The requirement could be excused. But that's a great question, because you know, we did it our way at Elm Creek, and you know, we did it. Our policy mirrors a lot of what North Dakota has. They had a really great policy that made sense for us. You know, our 4th, 5th, and 6th graders are excited. It gets a little more real when the seniors are like, "I have to pass what?" You know. And I guess the other thing I would say with this, I love the idea of, hey, we have a basic knowledge in civics, and we understand the systems. In Elm Creek, we really wanted to marry it with another component, that educated citizen, whether it's in a service learning type of model, but we're really seeing two things. Number one, student engagement. A lot of times it's tough to get students engaged in civics. And then the other thing that's more important equally as important is relevance. How is this relevant to us? And that's where, you know, hey, we think it's important that our kids have civics education, but I'm equally as interested in, do they volunteer? Do they vote? Are they engaged in their school, community, state, nation, world? And how do we get them to do that? When I went to Methodist College, I was thrilled, I knew before I got there, that they had an engaged citizenship component as part of graduation at Methodist. So this morning I'm reading student portfolios and giving feedback, and Methodist is an intense place. Most of our students are graduates. They have their bachelor's. They're coming there to get advanced degrees in nursing, although we have some 18-year-old students that are, you know, in college for the first time, but it's rigorous. And I walk in and man, they are studying, and I'm like, and yet we have this engaged citizenship piece. It is important, and what they're doing, whether it's with a mobile diabetes lab or lead testing in Omaha, or going into old folks' homes that in parts of town where maybe people are struggling a little bit. Or I had a student this morning saying, I went to an elementary school and had to deal with head lice and bed bugs, and I just kind of chuckled. I'm like, oh, welcome to my world. You know, but she realized, you know what? We're treating people, it's not about me, it's about others, and what can I do? And I'm like, that's exactly right. And so to get our students to think that way, and I was thrilled to hear that it's not a social studies class thing, it's a culture thing in a school. How do we build in that gratitude and service? And it doesn't just start in the 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. It is first, kindergarten, first, second, third grade, and those kids love to do it. You ask them to do something for the community, and they're all about it, and they're proud, and you're seeing parents post it on Facebook. And you start it there, and you keep growing it, but it's doable. People say, I don't want another test. And so how we do it is it's going to be interesting, but it's good work.
I would just like to hear some comments from Don from the American Legion. Is there anything you would like to add?
Well, before you go there, Mo, could I ask the commander here a quick question, if I may?
Yes, you can.
As a longtime member of the Legion, I'm just curious, as Mo is about to ask, in regards to the Legion's participation in this program. Basically, what is it? How are you functional in the
For a
this
long
journey?
time, we have promoted this conquest to get this approved. We support like County Government Day, Boys State, Girls State, where they come into University of Nebraska and form a government from the start to the finish and elect a governor at the end of the session. I have a prepared statement I'd like to read, and then, okay. Good morning, members of the State Board of Commissioners, Bloomstead. My name is Don Suki, and on behalf of the Nebraska American Legion, I would like to offer my support to increase the emphasis on civics in the classroom for the Nebraska students. You might be wondering why the Nebraska American Legion is lending our support for increased civic education for students of all ages in our schools. The answer is one of our founding principles. For nearly 100 years, millions of veterans have joined the Nebraska Legion and other nationally to help foster patriotism, community service, and volunteerism in many of our programs. Boys State, Legion Baseball, and our scholarship dollars. As designed specifically for school-age children, with over 32,000 Legionnaire members in Nebraska and nearly 2.5 million members on the national across the United States and across the whole world. We feel we are right to this vital resource to teach and to parents and students to share our pride of country. For nearly 100 years, members of the American Legion, both in Nebraska and nationally, have dedicated ourselves to promote civic education and duty in the classroom in our communities. We fought for our country to protect the Constitution, our rights and privileges as Americans, and most important, to protect our children and our nation's future. As a veteran, I am very deeply proud of my country, and I want to help ensure the students today and into the future can understand and appreciate the history, politics, and laws that have shaped and will continue to shape our nation. I am also proud to call myself a Nebraskan and know that our schools are filled with teachers and administrators whose goals is to educate our students to be active, engaged, and successful members of the community, and I applaud them for that. However, I have seen firsthand, like many of you here, the civic education has fallen to the back burner and teachers are forced on reading, writing, and the math skills. I am not sure whether that shift actually happened, but I hope that the civic education and service learning can once again be emphasis in our classroom, from elementary all the way through high school. I want to thank you for your service to the state. I know that you don't have an easy job, and there are many issues facing our educational system today. I hope consider the National Nebraska American Legion a resource for work you are undergoing, and we look forward to partnering with you, our schools, and our students to make civic education a priority. Okay.
Don, can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
Are our local posts, are they engaged with the community and the local schools in regards to, if you will, engaging this initiative?
I think we are, my post, myself, we are very committed to this education. Across the whole state, in my statement read that we all stand together. And I think that all they have to do is hear about it and they will promote it more, but they do the patriotism and go into the schools and try the etiquette of what
Yes.
this country is.
Thank you, Don.
Patrick?
It seems to me that given all the courses and extracurricular activities that students, particularly in high school, take, that this, a lot of this is not very relevant to them, or they don't sense it's very relevant to them. And again, I come back to, I know there's a pushback against more testing, although I think this is very, very important. I'm wondering if maybe there's a possibility that somehow we could work with various stakeholders to, if we can't mandate this, to provide some kind of optional ability to take the test and be recognized by their school systems or by their by the Legion, or some kind of something they could put on their resume that said, "Hey, I passed this," or that. I'm just looking for alternatives, because I know that we're going to try to deal with this in our standards, but I'm just. I also think it's very important, and you got to make it relevant, and it's not particularly relevant, I don't think, with a lot of folks, because they've got so many of these kids got so many other things on their mind that you're doing. But maybe there's an opportunity to find some way to do this so that, hey, a kid could opt into, I'm going to take that test and I'm going to get some kind of recognition for it.
Rachel?
Thanks, Mo. And I think there's so many things that are important in this discussion. And I'm going to go back to, Dr. Tickle, one of your terms was that you do it our way, that when you put this together, and I'm guessing that you had a lot of student leadership in figuring out how to do it, is what I'm hearing today. And I think that's the piece that's a balance we need to think about as a board, is it would be easy for the legislature to pass a law to require a test. We as a board could put in a regulation and require a test. But there's a challenge when we do mandate. And there's a challenge for me that's fundamental to our Nebraska values and to our Nebraska civic responsibilities when we have locally elected officials and a state board. And I think you demonstrate an example of how do we build on that balance, and maybe not go in a direction of a mandate, but go in a direction that involves recognition, that may involve best practices around accountability, that may involve other processes. But is this an area that we want to look from a deeper and broader perspective around civic engagement and civic participation? And my concern is if we move too much to just a test, and not even about the debate of the test and the length of time on test, we lose what I'm hearing, and that's the demonstration of civic readiness that you've provided for us today. And I think that goes beyond how you did in the test. I think how you've developed local policies, local processes that sound like they've been K-12 is really, and including the community and the American Legion, I think that's what we need to talk about as we move forward in developing and defining civic readiness from our perspective. So thank you again.
Molly?
Just a brief comment. I don't know if you know much about our AQuest system, but it's our new accountability, and what we're working on is one part of it is student success and access. And I'm wondering in our conversation in our domain if we can actually include in our model for student portfolio a record of civic engagement and service learning. And in so doing, we might even link some EBAs with service learning, which would be local control option, and maybe even the civics test as also an EBA that is chosen by the local school district. I know that in speaking with Corey, we want to make sure that you students graduate with more than just, I went to Joe Foss's line and the test is on and it's a great link. But I think we want to make sure that this is embedded in their behavior as well as their knowledge. So Thank you. This discussion will continue in our domains.
All right, thank you so much.
Dr. Bloomstead?
I have to make one comment. First of all, thank you for being here as students. It's fun to watch students be able to participate in this process. I am one of those government geeks. I grew up studying government, participating in it, in part because my dad was a school board member. My mom was on the village council. But I will tell you, the most meaningful thing for me from a civic engagement standpoint happened to be County Government Day. And not because I really wanted to be a lawyer. I thought that'd be a great job. I'm glad I did not go that route, given the lawyers in the room, that might be hard for me. But the reality is I ended up at County Government Day, and I, to this day, can almost remember that whole day, in part because I did not draw what I wanted, right? I did not get that opportunity. I ended up with the county weed superintendent. And you laugh, but the funny part is, do you realize just how important of a civic engagement and public service job that is in a state like Nebraska? We learned about rangeland management. We learned about protecting water rights and protecting the Republican River water that was going down that was before the lawsuits. But it's that notion of place-based education as well, that civic and community engagement is absolutely critical to our future. You mentioned leading from the middle, and I don't know where you got that line, but I've started to use that line relative to how Nebraska should lead from the middle. And I get concerned in civic engagement conversations that it's somehow about politics, right? That we get this kind of fear of engaging in a conversation because of the polarized nature of politics that we've seen. And it's going to take a substantial effort for us to actually get past those barriers. Sometimes that's a big deal. Free speech is a big deal, right? You know that. And the reality for us is finding ways that we do that very effectively in schools and not being afraid of those conversations. This moment in time allows us to do that. I think about civic engagement in science, as we talked about. I think that's my county weed superintendent side of that is, truly there. We had music today, and civic engagement in music is one of those things. And so thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. Quiz, who's your state board member?
I want to know.
Sure. Go ahead.
I can give you the district number.
I would just like you, thank you for letting us participate in this discussion this morning. And it means a lot for us as veterans. And what a great job they did.
And Don, I would just like to add that with your affiliation with the American Legion, that perhaps you could, at your state conference, I think you have a state conference or area regional meetings,
Yes.
if you could tout the importance of the local chapters being involved in their community schools. I think that would be a huge step of family, school, community partnership.
Which is, actually, I'm on the Children and Youth Commission. I'm the
lady that's
what do I want to say, the
Is it
person in charge. But that will be on my agenda when I report to the American Legion in January in Grand Island.
Thank you. And maybe I'll just show up for that.
Good. It will be at 9 o'clock on Sunday morning.
Answer to quiz. Maureen, I'm pretty sure, 99% sure. So, yeah.
We're actually right on the border.
Yeah, you're close.
So
You could have
right
a
between.
balancing act, yeah.
We are.
We'll share.
All right.
Thank you so much for having
Thank you.
us.
Thank you so much for being here today.
I guess one other thing, you're all invited to we have no closed meetings, so if you want to attend.
I might just add, maybe we found a new stakeholder or a new group of stakeholders
I
here.
think so. I think you're right. 2, youth and American Legion. Thank you again. Okay, we are now moving to our agenda back, which would be under action items. We're at 7.2, teaching and learning domain. And so, Maureen, it's still back to you.
My assignment here. Okay, we need to take action on considering a request from Friend Public Schools to waive 6th grade level athletic competition restrictions found in Rule 10, Section 004.02C.
Is there a motion?
make the motion.
Is there a motion?
There is a motion.
I made the motion.
To
Do you want me to
deny.
read it again?
Okay.
Okay.
So what's the action?
To deny
Okay.
the
Oh,
request, I
yes,
believe.
to
Is that
to deny,
the-
yes, I'm sorry, thank you. To deny this request, I'm sorry.
Okay. So we have a motion to deny, a second? We have a motion and a second to deny the request from Friend Public Schools to waive the 6th grade level athletic competition. Is there any questions or discussion? If not, then Denise, please call the roll.
Lily Larson,
Yes.
Glenn Flint,
Yes.
John Witzel.
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran.
Yes.
Patrick McPherson.
Yes.
Patricia Tim.
Yes.
Maureen Nichols.
Yes.
Rachel Wise.
Yes.
8 yes.
Thank you. Anything else from your committee?
No, we're done.
Thank you. Next, we'll move on to Student Success and Access Domain Committee. Molly, I'll turn it over to you.
I move to grant the Commissioner the authority to contract to the State Office of the Chief Information Officer for services connected to the Nutrition Services Direct Certification Grant from December 12, 2016 through March 1st, 2018.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments? Hearing none. Denise, please call the roll.
Lily Larson,
Yes.
Glenn Flint,
Yes.
Patricia Tim.
Yes.
Rachel Wise.
Yes.
Maureen Nichols.
Yes.
Patrick McPherson.
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran.
Yes.
John Witzel.
Yes.
8 yes.
Now let's move to 7.3B. I move to grant the Commissioner the authority to approve a contract with the Board of Regents of the University of Nebraska on behalf of the University of Nebraska Extension for a period from December 12, 2016 to November 30th, 2017.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments? Hearing none. Denise, please call the roll.
Glenn Flint,
Yes.
Lily Larson.
Yes.
John Witzel.
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran.
Yes.
Rachel Wise.
Yes.
Patrick McPherson.
Yes.
Maureen Nichols.
Yes.
Patricia Tim.
Yes.
8 yes.
Thank you. Next, we move on to item 4, Commissioners Appraisal Committee. I'll turn it over to John Witzel.
Thank you very much, Rachel. I move we approve the amendment number 2 in the employment agreement for the Commissioner of Education.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments? Hearing none. Denise, please call the roll.
Lily Larson.
Yes.
Glenn Flint.
Yes.
Patricia Tim.
Yes.
Rachel Wise.
Yes.
Maureen Nichols.
Yes.
Patrick McPherson.
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran.
Yes.
John Witzel.
Yes.
8 yes.
Moving on to item 5, Policy Committee.
Yes. Our first one is to approve the proposed revisions to the State Board Policy B5. This has to do with board committees, and there was a change from what was originally, you should have had it in your e-meetings. There is, with an addition of adding the budget, to the Budget and Finance Committee, the responsibility of managing the NDE Trust Fund for the Nebraska School for the Blind and Visually Impaired. And there was also a description rewritten on the Strategic Planning, Performance, and Improvement Committee as a standing committee. So
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments? All right, Denise? please. Correct.
Glenn Flint.
Yes.
Lily Larson.
Yes.
John Witzel.
Yes.
Patrick McPherson.
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran.
Yes.
Maureen Nichols.
Yes.
Patricia Tim.
Yes.
Rachel Wise.
Yes.
8 yes.
Moving on, I move to approve the proposed revisions to State Board Policy D6, that is with contracts, grants, and purchases.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments? Hearing none. Denise, please call the roll.
Lily Larson.
Yes.
Glenn Flint.
Yes.
Patrick McPherson.
Yes.
Maureen Nichols.
Yes.
Rachel Wise.
Yes.
Patricia Tim.
Yes.
John Witzel.
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran.
Yes.
8 yes.
Okay, I move to approve the proposed revisions to the State Board Policy D7, which is professional personnel hiring.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments? Hearing none. Denise, please call the roll.
Glenn Flint.
Yes.
Lily Larson.
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran.
Yes.
John Witzel.
Yes.
Patrick McPherson.
Yes.
Maureen Nichols.
Yes.
Rachel Wise.
Yes.
Patricia Tim.
Yes.
8 yes.
Okay, the next one is to approve, I move to approve the proposed revisions to State Board Policy 13, dealing with the audits of the Nebraska Department of Education.
Second.
Just go ahead. I'm taking. Okay, we have a motion second. Any questions or comments? Glenn?
So I would like to offer a motion that we strike the first change and just that first bullet would read, provide the State Board of Education with copies of audit reports, et cetera, et cetera.
So are you offering that as an amendment?
I'm offering that as an amendment, yes, to just strike the change to the first bullet. Provide, it would read, provide the State Board of Education with copies of audit reports from audits, et cetera, et cetera.
So I think we have two options, a
Sec-
friendly
Second,
or
to just strike the wording.
Remove that first bunch of red letters.
the original motion is to adopt that language as is. I think the amendment is to strike that, and that is, really tied to a process change with the budget committee. So I'm not hearing a friendly amendment, but I heard a second on the amendment. So let's take the second on the amendment and discussion around the proposed amendment, and then we'll vote on the amendment. So we have a motion and a second on amendment, so we'll now have discussion on the proposed amendment.
Who seconded that?
Molly did. Molly did.
Madam President, what are the repercussions of this amendment?
I think the piece that I would just need clarification on, I don't think when I read that again that in any way it keeps this from the full board. What it's doing is directing the committee to first do a more intensive review before it comes to the full board. And so I think when we strike that first sentence, for me, it tries to take it away from the committee and the committee's responsibility, which establishing that committee had the responsibility to start the process of doing a more extensive review and input on the audit, and then bringing that forward to the full board, and not necessarily denying the full board access to the information, but allowing our committee structure to have responsibility to really take a look, have the discussion, and then bring it forward. So that's why I don't see why that would be pertinent to change and strike that particular statement.
All right,
So go on.
the second change addresses, I think, your concern. The Budget and Finance Committee will review the audit and report their deliberations and recommendations to the board. So they're still on the hook to do that. All I want to make sure is that the entire board gets the audit report, because that was always the way it would. I'm just restoring that first bullet to the way it always was, where the entire board gets the report. We're just putting the Budget and Finance Committee on the hook to review it in depth.
So,
This is electronically.
Right. No killing trees.
so there's a second amendment coming?
No.
It's already there. That isn't the way it was.
No, that's not the way he said it, I don't think.
Yeah. Matt?
I need to
Yeah,
respond.
There's
Sorry.
two red
Yeah.
lines.
So here's what I would, so the amendment on the floor is to strike the first part. There's a current thing, I think what Glenn is saying, that the second edition in the language basically sends it to the Budget and Finance Committee already. So I think his point is whether or not that first part is absolutely necessary. We can still take it to the committee, and I think it's, the other way I could look at that is that we would provide the Budget and Finance Committee of the State Board of Education along with the rest of the state board. I mean, so the intent, I think, is fine on the amendment. It's just figuring out whether or not we want to.
What do we need?
I think what we want to have happen, so I guess the Finance Committee can speak to this a little bit better. What we want to have happen is that the Finance Committee would review those things and report recommendations to the full board. And I think Glenn's point is that can happen without that other phrase in there. And yeah, I'm actually okay either way. I'm not terribly worried one way or the other.
Can I just speak to this?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'd have no objection to Ben's, or to Glenn's amendment, if we took that bottom statement and made it a bullet point up at the right, first. So, maybe I would amend his amendment to move that phrase, the Budget and Finance Committee will review the audit and report the deliberations and recommendations to the board. I'd move that up as the first bullet point.
So is that friendly? Are you and Glenn
I'll
creating the
make it a friendly amendment if
Glenn,
Glenn
are
would
you
accept that.
Friendly? Are you, and Molly is the second, are you? So we're all friendly. So now, the friendly new amendment would be to move the bottom bullet up to the first and to strike the first statement.
It's not the bottom bullet, it's the
Yeah, red line.
Red line.
The red line to create a bullet. The red line to create a new bullet at the beginning, and then in the second bullet, strike the first sentence.
First change.
Or the
Just the
red,
red change.
Budget and Finance Committee.
So it will-
So- Yeah. Okay, I think we have a new friendly amendment, and we agree.
I would just advise that you restate what the amendment is doing, so we're all clear.
Yes.
And then vote on that.
Do you want to if not, I've got to come over here because I got
All right,
kicked off the.
I'll try to, I would
Thank you.
move as the friendly amendment,
Oh, we've got the motion, just
Restate what we're changing.
just restate the amendment change.
we're adopting Glenn's amendment to remove the Budget and Finance Committee from the first bullet point. We're taking the paragraph immediately below the bullet points, the budget, beginning with the Budget and Finance Committee, and we're moving that up to the first bullet point.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, are there any questions on the new amendment? If not, we'll vote on the amendment and then vote on the motion. Motion as amended. So Denise, we need roll call on the amendment.
Do I need to document the friendly part?
No.
Okay, all right.
Voting on the amendment.
I'm sorry.
All right.
That's all right.
quite unfriendly there.
Okay.
Not from this friendly group.
So Glenn Flint,
Yes.
Lily Larson,
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran,
Yes.
John Witzel,
Yes.
Patrick McPherson,
Yeah.
Maureen.
Yes.
Maureen Nichols,
Yes.
Rachel Wise.
Yes.
And Patricia Tim.
Yes.
8 yes on the amendment.
Okay, now we move back to the motion, the original motion as amended. Is there any additional discussion on the original motion as amended? If not, then Denise, please call the roll.
Lily Larson.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't get who moved the original motion.
I did.
Pat.
And Pat made the motion.
And the second?
Molly.
Okay.
Okay, so the original motion as amended. Lily Larson,
Yes.
Glenn Flint,
Yes.
Patrick McPherson,
Yes.
Maureen Nichols,
Yes.
Rachel Wise.
Yes.
Patricia Tim,
Yes.
John Witzel.
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran.
Yes.
8 yes.
Okay, one more. We're okay now?
Yeah, I think we have
All
one
right.
more. One more item on your list.
I move to approve the state board meeting dates for 2017.
Second.
We have a motion second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Denise, please call the roll.
Glenn Flint,
Yes.
Lily Larson.
Yes.
John Witzel.
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran,
Yes.
Maureen Nichols.
Yes.
Rachel Wise.
Yes.
Patricia Tim,
Yes.
Patrick McPherson.
Yes.
8 yes.
All right, thank you. We are now going to skip to 7. Why would we do this organized? We're moving to 7.7, the Budget and Finance Committee report, and so John, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. I move we grant the commissioner the authority to approve a contract with I move we grant the commissioner the authority to approve a contract with the Nebraska Association of Service Providers to increase the capacity of local and regional community-based service providers to effectively identify, assess, and serve individuals who have experienced traumatic brain injury.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments? Denise, please call the roll.
Lily Larson,
Yes.
Glenn Flint,
Yes.
Patrick McPherson,
Yes.
Maureen Nichols.
Yes.
Rachel Wise.
Yes.
Patricia Tim.
Yes.
John Witzel.
Yes.
Molly O'Holler.
Yes.
8 yes.
Thank you very much. Next, I'd like to move to approve the 2017 trust fund budget for the Nebraska Center for the Education of Children who are blind or visually impaired.
Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments?
Just a quick commentary here. I want to reiterate what I said yesterday. I think this is great that we're managing these trust funds, but I think there's a real opportunity here. When the University of Nebraska has $1 billion trust fund or foundation, it seems to me that the public school system of Nebraska would benefit from having the same kind of a foundation, and I think that powers that be should start thinking about that.
Okay, on to our next action item.
Nope, we haven't.
Oh, oh.
Any other questions or comments? All right. Denise, please call the roll.
Glenn Flint,
Yes.
Lily Larson.
Yes.
John Witzel.
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran.
Yes.
Patrick McPherson.
Yes.
Maureen Nichols.
Yes.
Rachel Wise.
Yes.
Patricia Tim.
Yes.
8 yes.
Moving on to item, excuse me. Go ahead, John.
We'll go on to our next action item, 77C, readopt NDE Rule 8, School Finance and Budget State Funding of Educational Service Units and Learning Communities with revisions to propose new section 008.03 regarding community achievement plans.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments? Hearing none. Denise, please call the roll.
Lily Larson.
Yes.
Glenn Flint.
Yes.
Patrick McPherson.
Yes.
Maureen Nichols.
Yes.
Rachel Wise.
Yes.
John Witzel.
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran.
Yes.
Patricia Tim.
Yes.
8 yes.
All right, I'm going to move on to item 8, approval of consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I would move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any questions, comments? Denise, please call the roll.
Lily Larson.
Yes.
Glenn Flint.
Yes.
John Witzel.
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran.
Yes.
Maureen Nichols.
Yes.
Patrick McPherson.
Yes.
Rachel Wise.
Yes.
Patricia Tim.
Yes.
8 yes.
All right, now, I think, do we have copies? We will move now back to item 7.6, the strategic planning. And hot off the press, here are the copies. We will take just a couple of minutes on this, so that we can go through and that you can feel comfortable. Many of the changes from discussion were put into the document, and I know we have not had a chance to see it. So we want to take a few minutes to make sure you look through it. Make sure that the changes and suggestions you've had that we have captured.
Want a motion to approve first?
I'm going to just take like a pause for everybody to look. So let's take a pause moment here before we move into any action and kind of glance through it.
And the glossary will be forthcoming, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think we've all had a chance to kind of take a look at it. So I'm going to recognize Lily to make a motion.
Madam President, in regard to the strategic plan, I move for the adoption of the strategic plan with the understanding that of the substance of the plan as presented.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second, and let's have some discussion from there. Yes.
I see we've gone through and kind of got the terminology standardized, but we don't have the glossary in here yet.
That's correct.
And when we put the glossary in, let's make that like a hyperlink so I can click that and get right to the glossary and see that definition. That's my.
I think that's great. Mhm. Any other questions or comments? I believe that the purpose of the motion being that we all agree with the substance is that there might be still some minor editing as it relates to some formatting, as it relates to some possible small wordsmith here or there. So we just wanted to be sure that as we adopt the plan, we're comfortable with the substance of the plan as presented. No questions, no comments, no. It looks like we are calling.
Come on.
Well,
I would like the commissioner to make one quick.
Yeah,
before.
well, quick. I'd like how you.
Because we have a lot.
No, first of all, I just want to thank the staff that worked so hard again, the committee that did that work. I want to name the staff that worked so hard. Donlin Rice, obviously, Carol Baum, Atwell McCusha, Russ Masco, Matt Hastings, Lindy Foley, Tricia Parker, who left us partway through. We might have got done sooner if Tricia had been here with us too. But also Dr. Friesen, Brian Halstead, Denise Fisher, and I know I'm missing folks that have been a part of that, but you know, really a lot of work that's gone into this, and I know we all appreciate that hard work, so thanks.
All right, Denise, please call the roll.
Let's see. Lily Larson.
Yes.
Glenn Flint.
Yes.
Patrick McPherson.
Yes.
Maureen Nichols.
Yes.
Rachel Wise.
Absolutely.
Patricia Tim.
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran.
Yes.
And John Witzel.
Yes.
8 yes.
All right. And thank you, Commissioner. So certainly we thank all the staff, but thank you, Commissioner, for leading us through this process, for getting this process moving. And I would like to thank the Strategic Planning Committee. That committee spent a lot of time, and so thank you, Pat Tim, Pat McPherson, and Lily Larson for the additional time and commitment that you made to help us through this process. So thank you very much. It's an exciting next step for us. Okay, now what do we have left? Where were we? 8, 9, we are to 10. Board reports. First, is there a motion to approve the meeting participation?
Make the motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any questions regarding the meeting participation that is in your e-meetings? Hearing none, Denise, please call the roll.
Okay, for the last time.
Oh, no. We could vote on adjournment.
Glenn Flint.
Yes.
Lily Larson.
Yes.
John Witzel.
Yes.
Molly O'Halloran.
Yes.
Patrick McPherson.
Yes.
Rachel Wise.
Yes.
Maureen Nichols.
Yes.
Patricia Tim.
Yes.
Yes.
8 yes.
One other item you've got for number 2, your monthly board travel expense report in your information. I will put forward the names myself to NASB for the public education position, and Molly for the governmental affairs committee, if that's still agreeable with anyone. I didn't really hear from anyone differently and jumping to volunteers, so I will put those names forward yet this month. With that, we move to item 11, information items and report. That you have that information, and we are almost to item 12. But again, I think would be remiss not to take this last opportunity to say thank you to you, Glenn, for all that you've done, and thank you to you, Lily, for all that you have done. It truly, I think we all have benefited from knowing you and having you, not just on the board, but enter our lives. So thank you very much. And with that,
Clocks are ticking.
with that, we are adjourned. Thank you very much. Oops, I think I forgot to say, a work session will be held on Thursday. I forgot the rest of my job. Thursday, January 5th at 2 p.m. and a board meeting will be held on Friday, January 6th at 9 a.m. Thank you. We are adjourned.